Morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the 3 minutes past 11 webinar on onboarding NDIS staff. Look, we're expecting about 20 people. I will onboard as many people as I can into the webinar, and then we'll commence, and I will just have to wait for people to ring the doorbell and let them in. And some people are all intending to watch this via recording anyway, so we might leave it at that, and if anyone comes to the door, I'll let them in. So welcome, and it's a lovely Thursday morning where I am. I hope it is wherever you are. So my name's Gina Ingerwall. I am the Principal Consultant for Effective Policy and Compliance, and I'm also an NDIS auditor, but I have been an assessor and auditor since about 2004. So I've audited under a number of standards, NDIS just being one of those standards which has come to the forefront in the last few years. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a deep dive and have a look at onboarding NDIS staff so that you can commence to do it in the way that aligns to the NDIS practice standards, and even, you know, start to work towards best practice and maybe some innovative practice as well. So we will commence that. So lucky everyone, there won't be a PowerPoint because it really is a bit hands-on today. So in terms of me walking you through the document, so no PowerPoint today. What we will do is, of course, start with a checklist. I think that is always the best way to start. So just, I can't see any faces at all. But if you, and we are recording so that anyone who is not able to attend is most certainly able to watch it at a later time. So, but I'm pleased, if you've got any questions, please just ask or put them in the chat box, put your hand up using the features of Zoom as well, whichever one works for you best. So there's some more people, here we go. Yeah, so let's crack on then, shall we? So the most important thing, I guess, is if you were to ask me what were the most common non-conformities that I see of a major variety for audit, it's definitely going to be staff related and participant related. Now, from a staff point of view, it is usually that documents are missing that are meant to be in the file. Processes perhaps have not been completed, and we'll talk about those. And also the currency sometimes of documents, whether that be a person's registration certificate on their car or the insurance on their vehicles, very common, and it will attract a major non-conformity as opposed to a minor, because of the safety issues around having an uninsured car. Now, even if the person has renewed their insurance or has renewed their registration for their vehicle that they use to deliver services, the fact that you haven't put it in there as an NDIS provider will still prevail as the major non-conformity, because it must be updated. There must be a way to see how someone is overseeing all of these things, because it's just by good luck that it happens to only be that you haven't updated your system, because if in fact someone's insurances had run out, then you are responsible. So just like when you take a tender, you win a tender for government services, you agree to make sure that you abide by all these legislations. It's the same for NDIS funding, even though it comes in different buckets through individual people. You are still agreeing to make sure that all these checks and balances have been completed. So let's share screen and have a look straight into one of my folders. And that's simply what I'm going to do, is take you to my Dropbox folder. If I can ever get rid of all these other things overlaying it. So we're in an onboarding folder here. And it's mostly around that. I am going to touch on something relating to recruitment, because if you want to collect everything that is required so that you don't end up with lots of work to do just before your audit, then you are best off trying to collect everything you need in the one go. Much easier than tidying up later. So in effect, we do have the onboarding folder, which is what we're going to focus on today. But there's one thing that also needs to be collected, and it does sit in recruitment. But you know what? There will be some people who maybe for them it doesn't sit in the recruitment. So I'm going to mention it. And that's the application form that the person actually will fill out to become a staff member for you. Now, the one important thing that needs to be collected since December is that you must ask about secondary employment, and you must get the details of that person's secondary employment. So incredibly important now. It also needs to appear somewhere where you can monitor all of those employees and which ones have secondary employment and who those secondary employers are and the contact details of those secondary employers. Does everyone feel does everyone understand why the NDIS Commission is asking for that? If not, someone, if you want to have a stab at why you think the NDIS Commission has now decided that that's an important piece of information to have, by all means, please.
Yeah, I think it's for workplace health and safety reasons primarily.
Yes, very much so. And it could be a few different reasons for that. From my readings and from what we're told as auditors, mostly it's going to be around when disease is spread. And, you know, it came about from as a post-COVID kind of, what's the word, a post-COVID implementation, because there were no ways of tracking where COVID was going and where it was, you know, going to end up next. So in a sense, they have decided to ask for secondary employment details. Also, a couple of other reasons. So yes, safety, and as well as so many breaches of confidentiality had occurred and are still occurring. So it's really important to know who the staff work for, because when it's as we know, we've got a bit of a gig environment now, so we've got people working with their ABNs because so that they obviously don't have to pay the enormous amounts of tax you do when you have a second PAYG job. So we've got an enormous amount of support workers working under their ABN. And so you might find one support worker with an ABN works for 5, 10 different employers. You may have PAYG workers who have a couple of employers as well. And why it matters in terms of the information is because of the lack of knowledge, I guess, for support workers around what they should and shouldn't say. So we need to know who the other employers are. It gives you the opportunity to write a conflict of interest declaration between yourself and that worker. And you and I both know that conflict of interest declaration, you know, as a document, it doesn't hold anyone to anything. You can't. But what it does is creates awareness. It's the process in the creating of that conflict of interest declaration where somebody has 3 NDIS employers. You get to have that discussion with them and they will learn, oh, I didn't know that was a conflict of interest. What's a conflict of interest? Well, the fact that you might, you know, have a person in this service that you discuss in the other service, and then that's a breach, it's a data breach, and it needs to be acted upon. So it brings into the awareness just by doing this conflict of interest declaration, and then you listing that conflict of interest declaration in your conflict of interest register, you get to see what your weight of risks are there, who's who works for 5 people, who I should really focus on and see that they understand data breach. Do my staff get education in data breach? Everybody should. you can't expect something of a support worker if you don't give them the tools and the information to be able to grasp it. Also, data breach means something else at a management level as well. So there are different activities that a manager or executive manager or team leader need to handle when there's been a data breach. So that's one of those questions. So ensure that whatever you have now, whether it is at the recruitment stage or whether it is at the onboarding, collecting of information stage, just make sure that one of your documents does ask that, and it does make room for who the employers are, what their phone numbers are. It's not quite as important in terms of the data breach when they work for an NDIS provider and they work for a milk bar down the road. Obviously, it's not quite as bad, but still disclosing information around clients, which they could very well do if they don't understand the ramifications of it. So it's just one way of trying to correct something that has turned out to be a bit of a trend. So in terms of onboarding, once again, so now that we've covered that, because I don't know where you'll keep that, whether you'll keep that in your recruitment or whether you'll keep that in your onboarding, but we've covered that now, so that's important. Now, there are two parts to the onboarding. There's the actual onboarding. I am getting you on today. We're going to do some forms. We're going to, etc. And of course, then there's the orientation, which may or may not be on the same day at the same time. Everybody's different. And it doesn't matter. There's no one right way. And you can be as innovative as you like, as long as you make sure that you cover off on all of the vital parts here. So, for example, I mean, I keep a basic file checklist in there, because auditing your files on a quarterly basis, if you can, will save you an enormous amount of pain and anguish down the other end of your next audit. The other thing is, if you don't have the manpower to do that, and I find a lot of people don't, there are companies like me that can do it for you as well. So we understand that sometimes I have a lot of providers who are incredibly stressed. And sometimes it's impacted on their health as well. And to do one more thing would push them over the well-being edge. So some people just can't do it. And also, you've got to think, when you take yourself away from the business to do that, is it really worth it, or is it more beneficial, effective, and efficient to ask somebody else to come in with a different eye and do your file checklist? So there is such a wealth of information in your participant files and your staff files that some of the really disastrous audit results that I've had people come to me with that I've never met before until they've had those disastrous results, it could have saved them such a lot of anguish, anxiety, and money. So file audit checklist is a great thing to have, but it's only going to help if you use it. And even if you did it, if you couldn't manage it quarterly, but you did it 6 monthly or annually, it's better than nothing, isn't it? So let's have a look at an onboarding checklist. So this is a kind of encapsulated, hang on, is that really what I want? Yeah, that's what I want. This is sort of snapped up what's necessary in the practice standards as well. As far as NDIS goes, it might look a little bit different in the aged care. It's going to be probably 95% the same, with a 5% variation, because the aged care standards might require something just a little bit different. As you would imagine, aged care isn't going to require an NDIS worker screening, is it? So, there are some differences. So this is tailored to the NDIS. So, your average kind of your employee documents, we must find that as an auditor. We must find an application form. As I say, we must find secondary employment details. We must find a position description for every person that you have. It doesn't mean that position description has to be different for every person. If you've got support worker, frontline level, basic level, and then you've got key worker or team leader or senior support worker, every person must have a position description. full stop. Signed letter of offer or their employment contract. Really, it doesn't have to be signed letter of offer and an employment contract. Really, one or the other. Well, you know, you've got to have an employment contract. So having a signed letter of offer is great, but we really are more looking for that signed contract of employment. I did put the letter of offer in there because people used to say, what about a letter of offer? I'll say, yep, if you've got it, you've got it. It's even better. Now, employee handbook, it is not a requirement. And I know that most of your audit companies have taken to sending out. The audit companies are very selfish, and auditors are, we can get a bit prescriptive when there's no need for it. For example, the auditor is going to think, if only all these providers would just have an employee handbook, you know, my life would be so much easier. There is nothing in the standards, I can assure you, that says you need to have an employee handbook. There are certain things that you need to meet, criteria that you need to meet, standards you need to meet, but they can be done in many ways, and it doesn't require an employee handbook. However, it's good if you have one. Make sure it gathers all the information that you know that staff need to know about. So that's good. But please don't think that you need to have one. Their personal details form, you know, what we're talking about. It's quite basic, I know. It's just, you know, who their next of kin is, etc., whether they have anything that you need to be aware of in terms of medically. And immunisation. So for nursing, absolutely has to be you need to collect information on a nurse's immunisations and vaccines. And now we've got our COVID, we need to have proof of people's COVID. This does not take account for the fact that you still need a monitoring process for that. We won't go into that. That's more a governance thing. So we'll just talk about what we need to see collected by you guys for your staff. Privacy consent form. What that really means is that a privacy and confidentiality form that, you know, your staff agree to not sharing any information, etc., about anybody else. The conflict of interest declaration, you always need to ask if there's a conflict. If there's absolutely no conflict of interest, you don't have a conflict of interest declaration. But this is there as a prompt because there are, you know, many providers who don't know to ask yet. And will come out of their audits with, you know, enormous amounts of conflict of interest, because we also have a very strong nature of component of family. We're employing a lot of family. Well, there's nothing that we can, you know, I have my own views about that, but they're just my own views. There is nothing wrong or illegal about that. We just have to manage it. It's a conflict of interest that needs to be managed and declared, because you know what the worst part is if you're employing family and friends is that it's what you don't say. It's when you don't say that. That's when the unrest and the uneasiness starts with staff, and the cohesiveness and the happiness in employment can be affected. Also, if it's not spoken about, there are a lot of people who don't understand the bias that can exist. And so we want to get it out in the open. Basically, a conflict of interest that is spoken about and managed doesn't become a problem. A conflict of interest where there is no transparency will become an issue, you know? So we may as well get it out on the table, talk about it, deal with it. If you're going to employ all your friends and you're going to employ all your family, well, perhaps that's how it's going to be. But please deal with it. The other thing is, and this is off topic, but sometimes people employ their family and they are no way knowledgeable or skilled or experienced or credentialed to be able to do the job. So please be aware of those things in the background as well. The criminal record checks, however they look for your state, it's going to be different. Working with children check, I always had, all the organisations I have run, I just decided, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, that I would just make everybody have a working with children check. You don't have to do that. You can have it on an assessed basis. which is, you know, do you need one? Do you work with children? Are there going to be children in the background of those families? But I decided that it was much easier to just have a across the board, all of the frontline staff, anyone interfacing with a client needs to have a working with children check, because of the fact that some of the client may not be a child, but they may have children in the home. So that's why I decided that. That decision is completely up to you. Your worker screening as well needs to be in there in the file. And then when people have moved to Australia within the last 12 months, there needs to be a statutory declaration that they've never been convicted of a murder or sexual assault and have never been convicted or sentenced to imprisonment outside of Australia. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that requirement, but it's I think sometimes it's very overlooked. So you really, for someone who hasn't been here for very long to develop a history, we need to make sure that they aren't coming with a great big long criminal history from their country of origin. Obviously, the 100 points of ID, we do slip down on that often. If you're not an Australian citizen, current passport, visa, etc., all of those, then the right to work form, some of that is routinely forgotten and left out of staff files. If someone is driving, and you must have a copy of their license. It must be on file. And then, of course, don't forget the monitoring of those dates for renewal. It becomes your responsibility. Also, nobody can start working in the NDIS without first having the worker orientation module. So your auditor is always going to look for that. There are some mandatory trainings as well. And in capturing that, you could say, I could say that the things that the standards say your staff must know about, and don't forget there will be different levels of knowing, are infection control, which must be done annually, and we must see the evidence of that. Emergency and disaster. It doesn't say annually. It says they must be trained in emergency and disaster. I always think it's a good idea to do it annually, but it doesn't say it must be. If your staff, this is where it starts to vary, if your staff are doing manual handling, then manual handling training must also be on their file as having been completed. It also says that staff will be knowledgeable. They will know how to handle complaints, how to handle incidents. So not only does it say that they must do that, it's a no-brainer that they must do that. Because when I see people who have been in business for 18 months, maybe from their first, their first audit, they're down the track 12 months, 18 months, and they ask me to come in and do an internal audit, and they haven't got a complaint, they haven't got an incident, and they've got 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 clients. There's no way that they cannot have a complaint, and there is no way that they can't have an incident. And some people are thinking how proud they are that that is the case, but really what it tells me is I'm going to dig much deeper. I'm going to look, because what I think my commonalities of this are, number one, people don't know what a complaint is and they don't know what an incident is. And other times they don't have mechanisms to deal with that. And there are some extreme cases where I have found, especially in aged care, where the environment is so hostile that no one would dare make a complaint. Or if you haven't got a complaint system, this is a true story. One aged care facility that I was working in as a quality manager, I was trying to get them ready for the next audit and the changeover from the standards. I said, and tell me about your complaint system. How can somebody make a complaint? Well, they can just come to me, the Don said. And I went, what? And she went, no, they come to me. They come to me if they want to make a complaint. And I went, that's not how it works. Nobody should ever have to front up to a person, and especially a director of nursing. There must be lots of ways, and one of them must be anonymous, in terms of not having to come up to you and front front you, especially in the NDIS, far more vulnerable. You can have some wonderfully articulate people in aged care, and perhaps the same in NDIS, but much of the time they're quite vulnerable. So we must have a capacity to be able to do complaints in different ways. So that's why that's just the story behind why when I see no complaints and no incidents, it's great to have complaints. If you see complaints, if you've got a pattern of complaints which are all the same and serious, you've got a problem. But on the upside, if people are making complaints, they're probably staying with you. It's part of quality improvement. Incidents, yes, I find people don't understand what an incident is. And one of the things I would want to say to you as an auditor is, if I can't ask your staff, your frontline staff, and also especially your managers, to tell me what a reportable incident is and quote them to me, I will have no confidence whatsoever that they would know one when they saw one. So it's that simple. If you want to aim for something, aim that all your staff can quote to you the reportable incidents, and that your managers know the reporting times on those reportable incidents. So that's why the training is so important. And people forget things. Repetition is good. That's why those really serious things are really good to repeat on an annual basis, if not more. Where are we? Now, a lot of people, I think sometimes we are grasping in the NDIS, I guess, to make sure that service is delivered and risk assessments are done. That sometimes, that's saying we've got big fish to fry and there are some things which really get a back seat. But what I don't see, and what the standards say you must have, is a training needs analysis. It's just a piece of paper that says, what do you know and what is it you don't know? Because then we'll plan around what you don't know. Otherwise, you're kind of just shooting crazily just by giving everybody training without seeing what they really need. What do you need? A training needs analysis. Now, it actually does say that in the standards, but it gets overlooked quite a lot by a lot of providers. And I get that. Some are struggling to come up for air. I really do. But as with the quality improvement maturity scale, the more people get everything under control, the more they'll be able to focus on innovation and quality. Yeah. So there's that proactive versus the reactive, and people are getting there at different, some people are getting there. They're really starting to fill out their training needs analysis, which should be done on onboarding, and then it should be done at a performance appraisal as well. There's any professional registrations that a person has must be there, copies of them as well. And these, and I've got this here on this because it's great for me to say these, and it's great to have a checklist. But what I saw was, but you haven't followed through with these things. Like, okay, have they provided it to you? Tick it when they have. Has it been signed as received? Has it been added to your compliance system, whether you have a compliance system piece of software, whether you have an Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is? And last of all, has that piece of evidence been put in the file? We need all of these. You can't have something in a compliance register if there isn't a piece of evidence to back it up. So we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. Great, it's done.
Gina, can I ask a question in regards to professional registrations?
Yes, of course.
If they have a professional registration, but they're not using it within their role at the company, do they need to still have it on file?
No.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, yeah, the professional registration, no. The qualification, always good to see that they've got something, yeah. But no, they don't need to because they're not using it. That's right. And if it's not in their scope of work, in their position description, no, absolutely not. That's right. So bank account details, we'll always look for that. The tax file number, whether it's in your software system or whether it's in the file. This can be a hard file or a soft file, it doesn't matter. Super fun stuff. It is obviously mandatory to give a Fair Work information sheet. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that. You would want to see, the how-tos of using your organisational software that has been given to people. Staff code of conduct. So a lot of people might have one code of conduct that includes the NDIS code of conduct. I separated mine out because it became so big with the two of them that it did my head in. So now I know I've got the NDIS code of conduct, which is a page, and then the staff code of conduct, which is about all the other things that matter to the organisation, and preferences that I might have. And then I don't have to constantly weed through, or nobody has to wonder which one's NDIS code of conduct, as in the commission, and which ones are things that I could take or leave if I wanted to, remove if I wanted to, because they're not mandated by the standards. That's why I have two. But anyway you do it is fine. The registration of their vehicle, if they're going to be driving for the business. And that could be, even if it's an admin person, and they might have to go to the post office, go and pick up some stuff from office, anything. If any person gets in their vehicle in the line of duty, then you must have the details of their registration, because it can come back on an employer, and it happens. If somebody's written their car off and they haven't had the right insurance, all bets are off, and all friendships really can become irrelevant when it comes down to money. So it's not worth it. Professional ID, so there needs to be an ID of some kind. So the standards very clearly say in safe environment that that your clients can identify your staff as being your staff, and it's not a T-shirt. It has to be a photo ID of some kind. So however you want to make sure that happens, we'll be asking about photo IDs as well. Vehicle registration. Insurance for their vehicle. It's always a controversial one. Of course, there is nothing that says that everyone that drives for you has to have comprehensive insurance. It is always a requirement, no matter who I've worked for, that I prefer and say comprehensive insurance. Reason being, if the car is not worth anything more than third-party insurance, I would be really hesitant as a business owner to want anybody to get in that car. And so also, all bets are off once again if they write their car off and they're unable to claim the insurance for that vehicle. One way or the other, it'll come back around to bite the employer. So I think that there are some great comprehensive insurance packages now that don't cost a great deal of money. They can be month to month, and if the person stops working, they can go back to their third party. But I most certainly don't run the risk of a staff member not having comprehensive, and I wonder very much about the car if it's third party, because I don't think it's fair that paying clients should get into a car that's incredibly old if that's the reason they're not insuring it with comprehensive. The conflict of interest declaration, which is what we talked about, that we will always look for that on your file. If we have discovered, which we will, through looking through the file or discussions, that person, between yourself and that person, there is a conflict of interest, because we'll see that on the employment form, we'll see it in the register if you've written, who the other employers are. So we'll know, and we'll be looking for it. When it comes down to our ABN workforce, we must see all the ABN contractors' insurances. Do you know? Would you like to tell me which insurances an ABN contractor support worker must have? Come on, guys, have a crack.
Yeah, so you're asking us to name a couple?
Yeah. Name the insurances that an ABN contractor must have.
They need to have workers' comp, I'm pretty sure, and third-party public liability. Is that right?
They have to have public liability. They have to have professional indemnity.
Professional indemnity.
And they may be able to get their own workers' comp, but more often than not, they get something called accident and injury insurance.
Right. Okay.
Because once again, if they injure themselves, then they're not covered by your workers' comp because they're an ABN contractor. Then they are going to come looking for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I will. you know, like I'm not, that's their livelihood. If they are really injured, they're going to come looking for you. So there's some really hard things that you need to ask for from employees, but you must, because I've been through so many of those situations when running not-for-profits. You know, so many of those insurance situations. I mean, I learned about managers and directors' liability insurance because when I had to let the most toxic staff member I'd ever worked with go, for the sake of all the other staff, I did have to make a payout from that not-for-profit, and the directors and officers' liability insurance allowed me to make a claim on that, which was fantastic. So sometimes I've learned the hard ways, but as long as we learn, it doesn't matter how we learn. I'd like to save you the opportunity of having to learn the hard way. So these are the things we want to see in the file. So you can see if they're not there, then the onboarding is not quite compliant. You're going to also get some different auditors. You're going to get some seriously overdone auditors, and you're going to get some seriously underdone, having a bad day, don't really care what you've got in your file auditors, yeah? Which can be really difficult because it gives you this benchmark of, well, that was easy, they didn't look at much. And the next time around you get someone who actually knows what they're doing or isn't having a bad day. This is what the standards kind of say that, you know, you need to have, yeah? The other thing we'll want to see in your file too, of course, but it's not on onboarding, is, you know, you would set it up so that you've got notes, so that you're able to keep private notes about your client as well, you know, about their performance, etc. But it's not an onboarding, that's for sure. So that's our onboarding checklist, which is really helpful. Now let's look at the other stuff around onboarding. There was so much else that I found people weren't able to demonstrate to me easily when I was auditing. So I gathered all of that information into some orientation checklists. And here is a sample of it. So if I were wanting, so if I took everything out of the standards that refers to what staff need to know, do, have done, you know, etc. It's this, and this is one of the easiest ways I know, you know, to make sure that they know what they're supposed to know. Everyone needs to know about the emergency procedure and have it explained to them so they understand their responsibility if there were an emergency or disaster. The NDIS Code of Conduct, has it been explained? Does it need to be? There will be some staff for whom that will need to be explained, others not so much. Here I've given, you know, you can choose how have you done that? And some of you might have online systems, so you can maybe, if you haven't got something like this, you can create it in your online system. So have you done it verbally? Have you given them a policy? Has it been through a learning management system? Was it a different way? So this makes our lives so much easier, and yours as well if it's done, you know. Complaints, incidents. I understand how to assist someone to access an interpreter or translator, because yes, we have to provide to our participants something that tells them how to access an interpreter or a translator, but the staff member has to know it too. So have you explained that to them? And it takes all of 10 minutes to explain this stuff to a staff member and give them some of the training as well, however you wish to do. Privacy and confidentiality. Do they know what it means? What's that good example? You have another employer and you talk about Johnny that you were working with and how Johnny XYZ. No, we don't do that. So we have to explain that. They can sign that privacy and confidentiality form that you give them, but do they understand it? That's the most important part. So the orientation should be as well as important as the onboarding. How can a support participant exercise choice and control? Do they even know what choice and control is? Give them an example. The importance of providing participants with easy to understand information and explanations. Do they know why and the difference between an easy English and an easy read? What will be the, you know, why do we try to break things down for our clients? We do need to be able to say that that we understand a person's right to express sexual intimacy and how that might look. it says that in the standards. So if we can explain that and give that to people in an example form. The problem with this is there are lots of judgments, there are lots of values, there are lots of people from different religions, and sometimes this stuff will come into their work life. Not what we want. So we want everybody to put those at the door. We want people to understand that, yes, even people with an intellectual disability are going to have some needs. And it's good if you can get people to understand that stuff. Your service delivery will be better if people can understand what the rights of your participant client group are. And just having some understanding around it, and that they might start to learn that for those of whom it's a taboo subject, you know, we have to put that taboo at the door when we're working on our work days. Participant consent and when to obtain it. So there's another one of the most common non-conformities is that the consents are not up to date. They're not even asking for the consents that need to occur. And that should be done at onboarding your participant, and it should be ongoing. If different consents are taken away or added, etc., let the staff know that, because how can you possibly, your staff should be your eyes and ears. You know, if you give them and equip them with the information, they love to report it back. So give them these pieces of information which the standards say people need to know about. How a participant can have input into their services and policy procedures. People get to their audit, they've done no feedback, they've got nothing to tell me most of the time about how participants can have input into policies and procedures. Just tell them feedback, give us feedback. And, you know, that's how our policies change. Understand the process required if I'm absent from work. Some people don't know that process. Please let them know. And when we've already covered that in their file is a position description, but do you know the most common thing for me when someone says, I really need help with the staff, is they're underperforming. They're really underperforming, and I pay them so much money and they've got so much. And the first thing I say is, can I see the position description? And they say, oh, they don't have one yet. I'm nearly finished. And I just rest my case, you know, like, how can they possibly know what's expected of them without a position description? Some people don't understand the conditions of employment. Ask them. Do you understand when you may be engaging the inadvertent in a restrictive practice? I've added that one in because I think everyone needs to learn what a restrictive practice is so that it's not occurring inadvertently, that it can be as simple as shutting a window because somebody keeps trying to get out of it. It can be as simple as locking the door because you're tired of running down the road after Johnny because he wants to go to the milk bar and buy a paddle pop. All of those things, people need to know what those restrictive practices are. You can't not do them if you don't know what they are. And asking people if they know how to exercise cultural sensitivities. These things can all be done with training, by the way. But if you're not having access to training, if you can't afford it, if you don't know about it, you can do it verbally. There are lots of ways you can do it even if you don't have a great amount of funds, yeah? And this is designed for people who may not have all the funds in the world to be able to, you know, have training processes or be able to provide training online or, you know, as a day training or something. You can still do things even if you're still trying to get yourself into a position where you have enough money to do the other. So it can be done because you can sit down and talk to each person about these. Do you understand why an NDIS provider is required to have suitable photo and ID? Some people don't understand and they won't use it. If they understand, they might be more likely to use it. Do you understand reasonable adjustments and how to apply them? We deliver services and supports. Do you know how capacity building works? I find the most disappointing thing is that many support coordinators have forgotten the part that says in the support coordination that it's capacity building. I'm going to show you how to do some of these things, even if it just comes down to, how do you make a complaint? I can make a complaint for you, but can I show you how to? I just see the capacity building is very misunderstood. There's certain circumstances where providers might withdraw services. Does this staff member know what they are? What you need to know about participant money and property can be found in the participant and money property policy. A lot of people, that's a really misunderstood one. We get to that standard and nobody really knows that they should be recording money if they are holding on to a participant's money for them. You know, even if you're just holding on to it for them, this is where we've had so many over the years fraud reports and disgruntled clients. So if you're going to touch money, you need to know how to handle it. So the participant funds log, if that's the way you're going to do it. Or some people have a blanket rule: we never touch a participant's money. We will not handle it for them, not under any circumstances. We'd rather it come out of our funds and then we claim it back from them later. And how to make referrals. Now, that's not for every staff, obviously. Not all of your support workers are going to do that, but for where it applies. But it's important that carers and participants understand the expectation, even if they wish to cancel their shift. Let them know, you know, let your staff know that it's important for them to know how cancellations work so that they can always ensure that the clients do. Like I said, they're your eyes and ears on the ground and they can bring you information and disseminate information, but not if they don't know. Let everybody know they all have staff members, that they all have a responsibility to report risk. They all have a responsibility to exercise duty of care. Do they know what it means? Because I find a lot of people don't. If you're working with participants, you are a mandatory reporter. Make sure they know that. NDIS are not permitted to give participants financial advice. That's just a really good way to be able to say, yeah, I can meet that standard easy, because we make sure at orientation we tell staff they can't give any financial advice. Yeah. So these, and then your evidence, of course, is that staff member who sat with the onboarding, the signature of the person being onboarded. You can change that any way you like. But so these are the two checklists that I will give you. And you can do with them what you want. I'm sure some of them, if you've got really flashy software systems or you're really good with forms, and you'll come up with something really amazing. So we've got staff onboarding and we've got staff orientation or induction, and that's the knowledge. You can deliver those any way you like, but I've given you the information about what needs to be included in those, and you can add to that innovation of any kind. With just a question here, with employee training such as manual handling, is this something that can be provided as a handout and verbal communication? The best thing to do with manual handling is to do some kind of theory training, and they can answer questions on that so you can test their knowledge. But when you're talking about equipment as well, it is the best thing to do is that somebody shows that person how to use that equipment. And if you wanted to do it in the best practice format, you would have a simple list of competencies. You just want to make sure that they can do all those competencies on that piece of equipment. General manual handling, it may not include equipment. It may just be helping people to understand how to not hurt themselves as they go about their daily tasks for your company. Yeah. But where it comes to a piece of equipment, please have somebody tick off that they have been shown how to use that equipment. Okay. Because actually you won't be covered if they hurt themselves, is what it comes. So we don't want the staff member to be hurt, for sure. And we're trying to avoid you being sued. Yeah. Our employees are home care employees. Domestic cleaning for NDIS participants definitely would be letting them do the theory at minimum and the assessment on manual handling. And if there's any lifts or slings in the workplace, they definitely need to learn how to use those. But, you know, cleaners can hurt their backs so easily. And if they haven't been, and that manual handling, I would be giving it to them annually for sure, and before they start the job, because it only takes one time of doing it wrong and you've got an injury on your hands. Any other questions? I'm going to send you those checklists, by the way. use them as they are or make them really fancy. Just a couple of other questions. How often should infection control? It must be done annually. It has to have a refresher. Thanks, Quinn. Yeah, that is one of the ones that has to be done annually. We have, in my training system, we have infection control, and then we have infection control level 2, which goes into more about antibiotic bacteria resistance. Just takes it that one step further, which is really good for people working in aged care facilities. Do you have a link for that? For my training? Yes, I think I can just put it in right now. If you're just buying a one-off, just get it here, like 1 or 2 here and there. But if you're doing large amounts of training, please contact me because we do discounts. But if you just got 1 or 2, or you just want to have a browse, have a look through there. We can make your own kind of package, which is, these are the things I call my onboarding necessities. And we have a standard kind of onboarding package as well. So browse to your heart's content. Any other questions around this? Did all of that make sense to you? I'm hoping that there might be some of you that learnt nothing because you already knew it, and that might mean then you think, yeah, good, I'm on the right track. And some of you who might have learnt something new, which I always hope. But remember, if you do it from the start, you just won't have that headache, that stress at the other end. Okay, well, this is recorded, so we will send it out to you anyway. Any questions? You know how to contact me, and I will pop all those off into the Eventbrite program and send you the checklist, okay?
Thank you, Gina. Thank you.
Thanks for coming along.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a lovely day. Any more questions? Oh, there's one in the chat. Thank you, Carol. Thanks, Mania. Thanks, Susanna.